Do you enjoy movies?
Do you enjoy adult beverages?
Do you enjoy conversations that could go off the rails at any second?
If you said yes to any of these questions, then you should check out the Films and Fermentation Podcast. I'm Leo.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Mike,
We're just three friends.
who like to talk shit about movies.
While getting shit-faced. So join us every week as we discuss interesting movie topics, like best ensemble films, most paused moments in cinema, and the occasional movie review, plus so much more.
When you add drinking, you have no idea where this conversation could go.
So find us on Spotify, Apple Pods, Good Pods, YouTube, or wherever you go to listen to your favorite shows. You could also visit linktree.com/films and fermentation to find all of our social media and podcast links. We'll be waiting for you to join us weekly at the crossroads between pickled and fermented. Cheers.
Cheers.
Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of All Hallows Eve Podcast. I am Jayson.
And I'm Kathi.
And hopefully we got all the kinks worked out. So,
How was your week?
if trying to get this podcast going was any telltale sign, it was pretty rough. Just saying. Mother Nature needs to take her fucking bipolar meds. I think we had 16 different seasons in 2 different days.
Wasn't bad this past week.
The hell, you say? It's getting to be towards the end of the school year, so everybody is all squirrely. So yeah, it's been a pretty wild week.
That was quite accurate.
Yeah, squirrely. Look at our kids. Squirrely.
Yep.
My goodness. All right, so how was your week?
Wasn't bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Can I live vicariously through you at this point?
Okay. We have a lot of PTA stuff going, so
Yeah, this week's going to be busy, isn't it? Damn it.
Janet.
Yep. Good thing we got a calendar. Start setting it on my phone. Hey, you have this going on. And hey, you have that going on.
Speaking of calendar, you want to tell people what's coming
Oh,
up
yeah.
soon?
Yeah, actually. So we, about a month or so ago? Yeah, about a month or so ago, we had the guys from Films and Fermentation come on the show, and we did a hilarious movie review of House of a Thousand Corpses with those guys, and we found out their real feelings about that movie and ours. But anyway, they got a hold of us about 2 weeks ago or so and said, hey, you guys want to come on over to our show? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So we will be recording that this week, and it'll be released next week. And it's I don't want to give out too much, but the title of it is Films That Time Forgot. So if you enjoyed that movie review, come on over and visit their podcast and join us for that episode. You'll get a double dose of us next week, Sunday and Monday.
And
So-
if you did not hear that episode, scoot on over to allhallowsevepodcast.com and you can pull up that episode. You can find our merchandise, find our fan page with our merchandise.
Yeah, and our social media sites.
So,
Do not forget to do a good old like and subscribe on that, and share it with your friends.
absolutely.
That's what we're here for. We'll make a fool out of ourselves, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it.
And
So
share that with all your friends. You gave a nice little giggle.
yeah, with some of it. Some of this stuff though is like really, really dark.
Yes.
So, and today's is one of those. But I digress. I almost said diverse, but I digress. We are going to skip everybody's favorite little segment we started. I know your heart is just crushed right now because you can't shock me this week, and I'm okay with that. Because the topic we're getting into might take a little bit longer than normal. So, sorry, we'll get back into that next week, but we are not skipping the news.
Oh, okay.
I told you like 3 times
I
we
know,
were doing
I
the
know.
news.
But I put it down.
Oh, boy.
I put it down. Hold on.
Okay. Waiting.
I got it.
Hurry up.
Okay.
God.
It's not loading. I had it all up and ready, and then we had some. Okay, here we go.
There. All right. Yeah. Here we go.
We had some technical difficulties.
I'm in the mood to push buttons today, can you tell? And not just those ones, yours too, so be on the fucking prowl for that.
All right. So this was sent to me from one of our listeners.
Yes. And sorry, Reagan is currently out doing wonderful things with beautiful people right now. And
In other words, she's running the neighborhood.
yeah.
She's running amok.
We asked, do you want to do the news this week? She kind of looked at us, and I'm like, you don't have to. She goes, no, I don't want to. Gone. She was gone. It's like, holy fuck. I mean, look at the rooster tails off those feet. Like,
Which is sad because I think that she'd like this one.
probably. But
well.
anyway, what do you got for me? Hit
All right.
me.
500 pounds of pasta mysteriously dumped in the woods of a New Jersey town.
500 pound. Was it a... Never, go ahead. You'd probably answer all my questions.
Pasta al fresco was served in a New Jersey town last week, much to the chagrin of city workers turned busboys who had to clear mounds of macaroni dumped in the woods. A public works crew picked up 500 pounds of noodles discarded into a wooded area of Old Bridge on the banks of the... I don't know how to pronounce that.
On the banks of a river.
Yep.
There we go. That covers all bases.
Mayor Henry told NBC News on Friday. No sauce, no gravy, no cheese. It was just piles of macaroni and some spaghetti. It's believed the pasta was dry and uncooked at the time it was dumped, but then turned al dente when rain fell on central New Jersey last week. About 2 inches of rain had fallen on the region on April 22nd through the 23rd, and the pasta was picked up on April 28th.
Ugh. Yuck. Oh, God. I would have just left it. It's biodegradable.
Keith, 33, recently moved into the neighborhood and was out for a walk when he came upon the piles of pasta. Word in the neighborhood, Rost said, is that the dry pasta was dumped by a man as he cleaned out the Hilliard Road home of his late parents, who apparently believed in having a fully stocked pantry. I was like, what was all of this? I just started reading the alphabet, pasta, to spell my name. I didn't know what to think.
No. Just stare at it and find my name in it. It's like a word search.
While Mayor Owen laughed about the incident, he took a serious moment to ask locals not to dump unwanted goods in the woods.
Don't drop unwanted goods in the woods, guys. Like,
Old Bridge is very rural, so we do have people who go out and illegally dump so much material in isolated areas. So we're constantly going out there and cleaning up. I mean, it's unfortunate because we can take so much of the stuff in at our recycling centers. There's no reason to dump a mattress in the woods. No reason to throw a refrigerator away. will come get it from your house. Electronics, rugs, padding, concrete, metal. It makes no sense to throw it into the woods. Even though the pasta dumper could be cited, Henry said police will not actively pursue the case. It was illegal dumping, but it wasn't anything hazardous. I mean, it's pasta, flour, water, and eggs.
Yeah.
We're not focused on that. There are bigger pressing issues the detective bureau needs to be involved in. It's not on the front burner.
Jeez. No, there was a whole shit ton of fucking puns in that sentence. Like 500 pounds of pasta?
That's a lot of
That's
pasta.
a lot of fucking pasta.
Like,
Holy shit.
who were her parents planning on serving?
Good lord. Like hoarders? Were they hoarders?
I don't know.
Pasta has an expiration date on it.
I don't know. I have no more information.
Good God. I would have just left it there. I wouldn't even cleaned it up. I would have just taken it, spread it out. The animals would have ate it.
Right, exactly. But
And
I don't think it's good for the animals.
Oh, true. But I mean, it is biodegradable, so it's not like a...
It's really not going to hurt the environment.
Yeah. I mean, who in the fuck would do that?
I don't
First
know.
thing you think of is like tires and
Refrigerators, mattresses.
shit like that. Yeah, not food.
Not-
Give it to a friggin' pantry.
Exactly.
You know, good
Exactly.
God, there's people out there that need that stuff.
They should have just called everybody, bring a jar of pasta sauce out, and we're going to have a picnic.
That's gross. You're gross. You're disgusting. But anyway, why? I don't understand that.
I don't know now. I need to look up how much.
How many boxes would 500
yeah,
pounds
exactly.
be?
And did he take it all out of the boxes and dump it on the ground?
So she's looking it up right now, but it's not giving her a straight answer. So apparently even Google doesn't even know that. So
That's a lot of pasta. So
that's like industrial scale pasta. So, well, all right.
because like it's only giving me measurements as like as far as like 6 cups equals
Mm-hmm.
nothing in large quantities.
All right.
And it's just in grams because, pasta doesn't really weigh much of anything.
Yeah, I know, right? God damn. For it to weigh 600 pounds, that's
500.
or 500 pounds, that's a lot of
That's a lot of pasta.
It's a lot of pasta. It's a lot of pasta.
That's one hefty spaghetti dinner.
No shit. All right. Well, that was fun and disgusting at the same time. Thanks, Renee. Appreciate that. Good looking out, buddy.
I won't have to make spaghetti for a while now.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-mm. All right. Well, this week we are going to dive into a topic that is kind of taboo in the wrestling circle. So we will get into that after this message.
Hi, I'm Chris,
And I'm Deb.
and we host a pretty fun podcast called Today We Laughed and Learned. This is where we discuss all the things we should have learned, but, well, never did. And we have quite a few laughs along the way.
Today we laughed and learned with Chris and Deb.
We're curious about everything, experts on nothing.
Come find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. And this week, well, a little bit of backstory to it. I was listening.
What's the title of it?
So we are going to be covering the Benoit Family Tragedy. This is actually has to do with wrestling. That's hence why I was watching so much wrestling this week.
An ungodly amount of wrestling.
I had to do some research. Okay.
The TV has been on wrestling 24/7.
Sorry. But what brought this on was I was listening to another podcast and they asked the question, should Chris Benoit be admitted into the WWE Hall of Fame? Well, I know my answer. Okay. And this story should put no doubt in anybody else's mind the answer, their own personal answer. Now, a lot of my one good chunk of my source came from the TV show Dark Side of the Ring, and they did a 2-part special on Chris Benoit. On that show, they interviewed friends and family of Chris Benoit and his wife Nancy Benoit. And there is no doubt in my mind that Chris Benoit was one of the best wrestlers in his era. You take everything that happened and just kind of not say it's there right now. Just on his wrestling technique, his ring presence, and what he did for the wrestling community, hands down, the best wrestler of his generation, in my own personal opinion. And there's a lot out there, right? So you had Eddie Guerrero. I know you're looking at me with this blank stare, but you had Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Owen Hart. You had a boat ton of wrestlers that really brought something different to the wrestling world. And at that time, they needed something different. Most of those wrestlers that I just said, that I just mentioned, they were all pretty much under 6 foot tall. They didn't have that huge physical presence like a Hulk Hogan or a Andre the Giant. I'm trying to think of people that you would know. The Undertaker, you know who he is. The bigger wrestlers. These were smaller wrestlers, but because they were smaller, they brought quickness. They brought the uncertainty of what was going to happen in this ring. It was a totally different feel, and he was one of those guys that brought that to the business. Now, you add in this tragedy that I'm about to go over. He was going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame, period. Hands down. Anybody can agree with that until this tragedy happened. It's just a shame because it just stinks because nobody really talks about men's mental health at this point. Even now. You're supposed to be that guy that shoulders and brunts everything from, supporting your family, all of that fun stuff. The stigmas of being a man, right? So with this story, you're going to have a lot of different layers on top. And do not get me wrong, what he did is inexcusable and I will never put a, oh my God, he's the greatest kind of spotlight on him because of what happened. So there's a huge, you got his wrestling friends that talk about him fondly. And then you have all those guys behind the keyboard that like to harass family members of Chris Benoit. So I don't condone the harassment at all. I feel for the family, but I will never condone what he did because what he did was despicable. All right. So let's get into this here. And at the end of this, I want your opinion. I know you're looking at me like a deer in headlights right now.
Because you're talking to me and you're expecting feedback, and I have no clue what you're talking about.
I'm not expecting anything back because I know you're not a wrestling fan like I am, or I was.
You are.
I don't like the newer stuff. I like the older stuff. Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, WCW, Monday Night Wars. I like that stuff. But the newer stuff, not so much. So, I'm not expecting you to be like, oh, yeah, that was a hell of a friggin' moonsault, or look at that, Hurricane Rana. Yeah. No, I don't expect that from you at all.
Because I have no clue what you're talking about.
So, at the end of this, though, I want you to Just let me, give me your opinions on it. All right. From an outsider looking in. There we go. How's that?
Okay.
So, Christopher Michael Benoit was born to Michael and Margaret Benoit on May 21st, 1967, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He had a sister, Lori, that lived near Edmonton, which is actually where Benoit was billed from for most of his career. So when they come out onto the ramp and they're giving the introductions, they say where he's from. And most of his career, he was billed out of Edmonton. So Chris had a relatively normal childhood, like most people do. And then he found the world of professional wrestling. At the age of 12, his father took him to a local wrestling event, and Benoit said that there were two wrestlers that, quote, stood out above everyone else, end quote. And those two wrestlers were the Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington, and Bret Hart. I know you've heard of Bret Hart.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
The Dynamite Kid was one half of the British Bulldogs. Yeah, I know you know who they are. Probably vaguely.
Vaguely.
But if you compare Tom Billington and Chris Benoit, if I held up two pictures of them, like their stature was almost the same. They were short people, big builds, just amazing wrestler is what he was. Bret Hart, if you're a wrestling fan, you don't need to explain who he is. The excellence of execution. One of the greatest wrestlers ever. Go ahead and laugh. I'm fine.
No.
So, shortly after Chris started to train with weights, he actually traveled to Calgary. And Calgary was the home of the Hart Family Dungeon. The Hart Family Dungeon, or the Hart family in Canada, are like royalty. You ask anybody from Canada, and I bet you even if we asked Deb, she would know who the Hart family is. Stu Hart was a patriarch of that family, and he actually started a wrestling school in their basement, and they actually had a wrestling bear that lived under.
Wait, a real bear?
A real bear that lived underneath their porch, and they would wrestle, not in this dungeon, but they would wrestle this bear. Yeah. But if you went to the dungeon, you got the best training, period.
Well, if you're wrestling a bear, you better be good.
Right? So this is actually when he convinced Stu Hart to let him train there. This is where he was schooled in and perfected his unique wrestling style. And Benoit had a very unique wrestling style.
You have to have a unique wrestling skill if you're wrestling a bear.
Right.
Just say it.
Just
I'm stuck on this.
Yeah. Don't get stuck on it too much. Just throwing that out there because there's going to be a lot coming at you and you're going to be like, what?
Am I supposed to be taking notes?
No.
Okay.
No. So he actually had a style that was very reminiscent of the Dynamite Kid. And at a height of 5'11", he was very small in stature, but his physical appearance and high-risk style made up for that short stature. That's like me getting into wrestling. I'm 5'6", 5'7". They're gonna look at you and laugh, right?
Yep.
So you gotta break out of that mold and figure out how can I be noticed, right? So in 1985, at the age of 18, Benoit left the dungeon and began his career with Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling promotion that was based out of Calgary. This is where Benoit really started to hone his wrestling skills. He started to use moves such as the diving headbutt and the snap suplex, which were like homages to the Dynamite Kid.
Where do they come up with the names of these things?
The wrestling moves?
Yeah.
Don't ask me. I ain't a fucking historian. I don't know.
Oh.
All right, so Benoit really flourished in this territory. He held the tag team and heavyweight titles a total of 8 times, and it was during this time that he also married his first wife, Martina, in 1988. And he ended up having 2 children with her, and that was David and Megan. And poor David has gone through hell with what happened, and no kid should have to go through that. The kids were innocent in the story, and for assholes out there to attack him on social medias, it's one thing to do it behind a keyboard, but do it in front of their face and see what happens. You know what I mean? But anyway, unfortunately, Stampede Wrestling fell on hard times, and they ended up closing its doors in 1989. And with a recommendation from a fellow wrestler, Benoit actually headed for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So with wrestling, if you're a fan of wrestling, you know that wrestlers bounce from promotion to promotion. A lot of it is to keep their name fresh, and a lot of it is you're going from one promotion to another because technically it's a better promotion, so you're going to get paid more.
So one storyline is getting stale.
You move on.
Gotcha.
Right? So in New Japan, it's where Benoit perfected his craft. Okay, he spent a year training in their dojo before he even had a match. So he did a year of training over there before he even had a match over there. In his early matches, he donned a mask and used the ring name the Pegasus Kid. He is quoted to saying that he hated wearing that mask, but over time it kind of grew on him, and it was part of his in-ring persona. And in 1991, he reinvented himself as Wild Pegasus.
Such
and
a girly name.
Well, you got to remember, it's Japan. So you have these big over-the-top names, and personas, so you have to try to find something that will set you apart from that, right? It was here that Benoit arguably had some of his best matches. And I look back and I watched some of those, and yes, they were amazing matches. Even the ones with Eddie Guerrero were the ones that stood out. And I will explain Eddie Guerrero's part in this story in a couple of minutes. So it was also here that Benoit first met the wrestler named Black Tiger, or Eddie Guerrero. All right. Eddie Guerrero was a lucha libre, and he comes from a very famous wrestling family, and I believe he was 3rd generation. So he grew up wrestling. That's all he ever knew. And according to Eddie's wife, Vicky Guerrero, they couldn't stand each other at first. And that comes from Dark Side of the Ring. She said that.
Benoit and...
Yeah. Benoit and Guerrero couldn't stand each other.
Okay.
Guerrero used to say that, God damn, I'm working with this guy for a week. I can't stand this guy. But as time went on and they were wrestling and they got to know each other, they grew to actually respect each other, and eventually they ended up being best friends. So when you're a wrestler, especially in the States, it's called earning your dues or paying your dues. You don't fly, you drive together with like 3 or 4 different wrestlers. And this is when you get to know people and become friends, right? And this is what happened to Eddie and Chris. The more they worked together, the more they traveled together, the more they got to know each other, and they grew to be almost brothers by the sounds of it. Benoit had a very small stint in WCW between 1992 and 1993, and it's not even worth mentioning. And then he went to ECW in 1994. ECW is Extreme Championship Wrestling. And this is where he gained the nickname The Crippler. It was here during a match with a wrestler named Sabu that Benoit accidentally broke Sabu's neck.
What?
Yeah, it was like literally within the first minute of the match. He went to do a move, Sabu moved wrong and literally landed on his neck and broke his neck. After the match, Chris was so distraught about what happened that he broke down. He broke down in tears. He couldn't believe that he botched a move. When in all actuality, it was how Sabu he moved in midair, so there was really nothing Chris could have done about it. But that's the kind of wrestler that Chris was. Even if it wasn't his fault, he still took it to heart because that's his craft, right?
Mm-hmm. Which any normal person would feel remorse.
Exactly. And he did. He felt tons of remorse. After that, the promoter of ECW ran with that. The Crippler, Chris Benoit. That is the nickname that I am used to. The Canadian Crippler or the Crippler, Chris Benoit. Not Rabid Wolverine that WWF came up with and all of that. So he left ECW in 1995 because of a paperwork issue. His work visa actually expired, and because the paperwork wasn't put in on time, they revoked it. So he had to go back to touring Japan, so he still had money coming in. And he did that until WCW signed him in late 1995. When Chris went to WCW, this is when Benoit met Nancy Tuffoloni. I believe that's how you pronounce her maiden name. She was actually married to another wrestler, Kevin Sullivan. Sullivan was WCW's main booker at the time, and before you ask, a booker is a person that sets up the matches for the wrestling promotion.
That was like self-explanatory. I got that one.
Okay, well, according to the cable documentary Dark Side of the Ring, Sullivan actually booked his own divorce. Let that one sink in for a couple of minutes. So he put himself in a position to where he booked his own divorce.
I don't get it.
All right. So Nancy, or Woman, as she was known as in WCW, was born on May 17th, 1964. She became Kevin's valet or manager in 1984. And because they traveled everywhere together, Kevin and her ended up marrying in 1985. Okay. So we're going to fast forward to 96, 97. Sullivan was in an ongoing feud with Benoit when Sullivan added the angle that Woman was having an affair with Chris. It was just a storyline at first. So he booked his own wife in having an affair with Chris Benoit to throw in an extra angle on this feud. Yeah.
Okay.
So the two were actually forced to spend time together to make it look real. And over time, it actually ended up being a real life affair. Chris's marriage to his first wife, Martina, was actually falling apart during that time, as was Nancy's. Sullivan was accused of spousal abuse during that time. And according to Nancy's sister, Sandra, Sullivan was abusive, and Chris was like her knight in shining armor. He was there when she needed him.
Gotcha.
It all came to a head at WCW's Bash at the Beach when Benoit and Sullivan's anger for each other continued backstage at the show. So even though, because it was a retirement match, if Benoit beat Sullivan, Sullivan would have to retire. Benoit beat Sullivan, and basically what this did was it allowed Sullivan to do more stuff backstage instead of performing out front.
Gotcha.
Right? But because of that angle and because Nancy and Chris were falling in love, whatever Sullivan did outside of work affected Chris, and it just boiled over after the match. And they literally got into a fight backstage after this. That was a lot of animosity, and that's actually what caused Nancy to leave Kevin Sullivan, was because of the spousal abuse. And Chris and Nancy ended up falling in love. Well, Nancy ended up leaving WCW in 1997 to actually manage Chris's life from home, and she also wanted to start a family. Like
So she didn't have
she
kids
didn't
up until-
have any kids at all up until her and Chris got together.
Okay.
So she, that natural urge, she wanted to be a family person, and she figured she could manage Chris's life too from there. So Chris actually left WCW in 2000 with Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, and they signed with WWF/WWE. So I remember that match, or I remember when they showed up on WWE programming. I was actually married to my first wife at the time, and wrestling was my life, and we were watching that, and I looked at her and I said, holy shit. They panned over, and there they all were. Like, you never seen that. You didn't think about that. People were leaving the WWE to go to WCW because they were giving guaranteed contracts. And for those four to come to the WWE, that was huge. That was huge news. And it was exciting because they're bringing in new blood. So basically, when you reach the WWE, it is considered the pinnacle of your wrestling career. Like, that's the top of the top that you can get to. And now that Benoit was there, his fame skyrocketed. And that's true. So I'll explain this later after this. But it was here, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, when taking huge bumps and chair shots, a bump is basically a fall. So these guys were taking huge bumps and huge chair shots, and those were actually considered like a badge of honor. Like, you grunted and you took it. And these shots were shots to the head. You had being ran into walls face first. Some of that stuff, they say it's fake. But if you watch those chair shots, I don't care what anybody says, that's not fake. And you're going through tables every night for years, that's going to affect somebody over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, taking those huge bumps and chair shots were brutal. But along with those shots came championships. Like, you were willing to put your line out there for the bit, or your health out there for the business, and they almost like rewarded that, right? So Chris worked his way up the ladder, and on March 14th, 2004, at WrestleMania 20, Benoit won the World Heavyweight Championship. And after the match, he celebrated that monumental point in his life with his best friend, Eddie Guerrero, who was actually the reigning WWE champion. So the two that came up the ranks together were both brought over to WWE together. They both won titles at the same time, and they celebrated together in the ring. This was like the top point of Benoit's life, because 2 years prior, or 4 years prior, on February 25th, 2000, Nancy and Chris actually welcomed their son Daniel to the world. And on November 23rd of 2000, Nancy and Chris were married, with Daniel actually serving as his best man in his wedding. So this was like his high point in his life. Things couldn't get any better, you know. And he had this persona of being stone-faced. You didn't know if he was happy, sad, mad. He just stared at you. So this here is just, when you're looking at it on paper, this is like your life's work coming to fruition, you know. And unfortunately, all of that came crashing down about a year or so later. On November 13th, 2005, Eddie Guerrero was found unresponsive on the floor of his hotel room. Chavo Guerrero, who was his nephew, was the one that found him, and he ended up calling, or telling Benoit over the phone what happened to Eddie. Eddie ended up dying of, I believe it was heart failure at the age of 38.
Dang!
You know, it's okay. I'm going to say this just as a side note. All right. When you are traveling the road 350 days plus a year, night after night after night, you're on 2 weeks, you wrestle 2 weeks, you get 4 days off. Wrestle 2 weeks, get 4 days off, right? You're taking these huge chair shots every night. You're taking these bumps on concrete. You know, they're flipping them on concrete on their backs. You're running into immovable objects. You're being hit with ladders. You're being put through tables. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, don't ask me that question, because I would tell their dumbasses not to do it to begin with.
But this was their profession. This was their
Well,
art.
that was their choice. Because
Okay.
as a mother or a wife, I would be like, you kind of brought it on yourself. Isn't that what you tell the kids? Go ahead and do it. If you get hurt, don't come crying to me.
Anyway, there starts a cycle of painkillers and pills and alcohol so you're able to keep doing what you love to do. You need that pain to go away to be able to move on the next day. And a lot of these guys ended up being addicted to painkillers and, you know, things like that, just so they can keep working and providing for their family. The following night on WWE Raw, they had a memorial show for Eddie. And I remember this because I watched it. And there was an interview with Chris, and he was visibly distraught. He was crying. He was like, he literally broke down on air. And it was that point where the WWE should have stepped in and said, hey, Chris, take a couple of months off. But if you do that as a wrestler, because it's such a cutthroat business, you take a couple months off, somebody else is going to slide in there and take your spot. So you got to start all over again, right? So Chris didn't want to do that. He didn't say anything. WWE never even brought it up. So in the coming months, Benoit fell into a severe depression and literally started to shut down. He stopped talking to his friends. The arguing at home with his wife got more intense. He didn't know he didn't know what outlet to take, right? So at one point, his family gave him a journal to write down his thoughts in. And when he started doing that, it started becoming a little bit easier at home. Chris wasn't as erratic, I guess should be the word. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Chris was actually slated to do a series of house shows in Texas, and he uncharacteristically no-showed that weekend. Chris was a worker.
Right.
He didn't miss any work. So it was very weird for him to no-show a show. He told WWE officials that Nancy and Daniel were suffering from food poisoning and that they were vomiting blood and that they were at the hospital. So he needed to stay with them there. So on June 25th, 2007, the WWE called the local Fayetteville, Georgia police to do a welfare check on Chris because they haven't heard anything from him, and he no-showed a pay-per-view, which is a no-no, right? It was around 2:30 p.m. when they discovered the bodies of Chris, Nancy, and their 7-year-old son, Daniel. As a knee-jerk reaction, the WWE did a remembrance show before all of the facts of the cases were released. So it was like, oh, shit, he died. We need to do something. We don't know what happened, but we're still going to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was found that over a 3-day period, Benoit had killed Nancy and David before killing himself. On Friday, June 22nd, Benoit killed Nancy in an upstairs office. Her hands and feet were tied together, and it's indicated that he put a cord around her neck, put his knee into her back, and strangled her to death. I've read the autopsy report because they're open to the public. You can see them. In the autopsy report, there was a bruise in her back, so they think that he pulled so hard on that cord with his knee in her back, and yeah, he ended up strangling her to death. And Daniel was sedated with Xanax, and was likely to be unconscious at the time of his death. It is reported that he was strangled to death because he had internal injuries to the throat area, but had no bruising. There were Bibles left by the bodies of both victims, and there was actually one left by him too. He left Bibles at all of them. There's a rumor out there that said that he did his finishing move on his son, and that's what caused him to asphyxiate.
What is the finishing move?
It was called the Crippler Crossface, but I take that as just rumor because nobody was there, nobody knew what happened. I don't even want to picture that, right? So later, Chris actually committed suicide by removing the bar to his pull-down machine. So it's one of those machines you pull down, right?
Yeah.
And he fashioned a noose on the end of it. He set the weight of the machine at 240 pounds. And he wrapped the noose around his neck and then released the weights, which caused his death. I'm just picturing it right now. I can't. So after more of the details were released, the WWE backtracked and removed Benoit's name, face, and most of his legacy from their website and shows. And they instantly distanced themselves from the Benoit murder-suicide. Later, rumors swirled that this was a roid rage incident because there were high levels of testosterone found in his toxicology report. But he was also being prescribed testosterone as a treatment for a type of therapy which was common for people who used steroids and had suffered testicular damage. So apparently
there was a reason for that testosterone to be there.
Yeah, for the high levels of testosterone to be in his body because he was being treated for some kind of testicular damage. Another rumor is that Benoit was suffering from severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I said it the other day. Encephalopathy, or CTE. We'll just call it CTE. This is caused by repeated and untreated concussions. Tests were done on Benoit's brain because they wanted to find out what caused this. They wanted to know if they had a feeling something was going on, but they weren't sure. So Benoit's father donated Chris's brain, and it was found that he had severe damage in all 4 brain lobes and brain stem. All 4 lobes.
I can see that easily.
Doctors said that the damage was so severe that his brain resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. He was only in his 40s. They said that repeated concussions can lead to dementia and can contribute to severe behavioral problems. Michael Benoit, Chris's father, suggests that this could have been the leading issue in the murder-suicide. I think maybe it was a mix of the two. He was being treated. He had high levels of testosterone in his body, plus that So it kind of, you put the two together, not good,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in the aftermath, like, they completely wiped Chris's name off of everything. And the reason I was watching a lot of wrestling is because I'm like, let's find out, because I know he did main event a WrestleMania. So I went back on Peacock, which is WWE.com, or WWE is part of Peacock now. And I watched WrestleMania 20. I fast forwarded through the whole fucking thing to find out about that main event. It's still on there. You can watch him wrestle. There are still matches that the WWE has not wiped off of anything. So he's still on there. They haven't wiped him completely off. As for WWE.com, I mean, there's no trace of him on there at all. Anywhere. The aftermath of this, it almost caused the downfall of the WWE because of chronic concussions and the use of steroids still. It really, it was a downward spiral there for a while. For the business that he loved, he almost brought down because of what happened. Now, I asked earlier.
But my question
go
is,
go ahead.
did he almost bring it down, or did they let him down, and in the process were tearing themselves down? Because instead of turning this opportunity around and trying to provide help.
When Guerrero passed away?
Yes.
Yeah. They just kept the status quo and kept going. See, this is where now in the WWE, they do not take as many headshot or chair shots. If you do see a chair shot, very rarely is it ever on the head. It's always a body shot. And if you watch the chair shots to the head up close, they don't even touch him. Right? Concussions. There have been major players in the WWE recently that were not cleared to come back to work because of a concussion. Like, there was one, it was over a year before he was able to come back because of one concussion. It was that severe. So the WWE did learn from this.
But not enough.
It always seems like the WWE is always reactive instead of proactive. And you've heard me use that term before with businesses we've worked for. They could have stepped in when Eddie passed away. They seen what kind of state he was in during that vignette that he made, or that they made them make, and said, hey, let's offer you some help here. Take some time off. Let's go talk to somebody, right? But they didn't do that. He was on a plane the next day going to Europe after Eddie's funeral.
But this also, you were talking earlier about how people don't talk about men's mental well-being, but men promote not talking about their mental well-being more than women do.
And a lot of that is because
you bash each other. Oh, you're being such a pussy. Oh, you're being such a crybaby.
Yeah.
Instead of encouraging and trying to help, you bash each other to the point where I'm not allowed to say anything.
Yeah. No, and I'll be the first one to tell you that.
So
it's that stigma of being a man, right? And I'm not saying this. I do not condone what he did. He killed his wife and his 7-year-old son. For me, the guy can stay wherever he's at now, right? But at that time, yeah, I guess you do learn after the fact, right?
I think there was 2 huge opportunities. One, when the first guy passed away.
When Eddie passed away.
When Eddie passed away, something should have been done then. And when Benoit passed away, it was a huge opportunity for wrestling in general to step up and say, if you are suffering, if you are feeling there's help out there, please seek that help out.
They could have turned this
Instead
negative
of-
into a positive by
Instead
promoting
of
that.
hiding it and pretending that his legacy doesn't exist, which is not fair to his family.
Yes.
He does still have 2 living kids, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yes, he has 2 children, and the fallout from this was they did not deserve what they got from everybody, right? They were innocent in this,
Mm-hmm.
and because that's Benoit's son, there's got to be something wrong with him, right? Which is wrong. And that's unfair to them. Yes, they could have taken this and turned it and promoted mental health well-being, but they didn't. They really didn't. The WWE felt like they were being attacked, and they were like, nope, that's unfounded proof, blah, blah, blah. He killed his wife. We don't want to talk about it. That's basically what it was. There could have been a whole lot more done for this tragedy not to happen. And yes, it takes that person saying, I need to talk to somebody, or I need to step away for a while and clear my
people
head.
being accepting of that and understanding. And in today's society, people, and it's not just with wrestling, just in general, are not accepting of that. At least I find here in the States, it is not acceptable to say, I can't come in today. I have to take a mental break. I need to shut down for my own well-being.
No.
It's
about the bottom line. I need
that's
money.
not acceptable.
You know.
And as far as wrestling, that 100% plays right into that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, if you're not there to defend your title, they're just going to create a new character that's going to take your title.
Yeah,
and
you're going
move
to be
on
left in the dust. Yep. Just like any other place you work. If you're going to take a couple of days off, here you go. I'll slide somebody into your position. You can go have this one. You know, and I've seen it happen.
I have too. And a lot of situations, it's just people playing the system who don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
But there are legit times, though, when other people were like, I need to step back. I need to recenter, do whatever I need to do to get myself back into a better place. And today's society does not accept that.
No, absolutely not.
And that's sad. And in this situation, do I think there was mental? Yes. Do I think there was physical? Yeah, I think there was a lot that went into this.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to totally wash their hands of it and say there was no responsibility on their end is really sad. I think it's horrible how the children that are still alive are going to have to deal with that their entire lives. That's not fair to them.
No, absolutely not. A lot of the reason I bring this up is because the month of May for me is a very hard month. You know that. And I lost 2 brothers. One to a car accident and one to suicide. How often do I talk about that?
You refuse to. And it's frustrating because I can't help you or interact with you because I don't.
Because I was raised that you shove it down. You put yourself into work. You deal with it that way. The month of May for me is a shutdown month. It always has been. My brother passed away because of a car accident on Memorial Day weekend. It was his fault. He was drinking and driving. And I dealt with it with drugs and alcohol. It took a long time for me to accept that fact that he was gone. My life has to move on. I was in a downward spiral. So part of me understands the pain that he was going through. You lost your best friend, your road buddy, the one that you can always turn to, the one you always laughed with, right? But there are always two roads that you can choose. You can either destroy yourself, like he chose to do, or you can try to better yourself. Yes, I don't talk about it much, but I understand that whole I'm a man mentality. Put it away. Don't talk about it. Right? So, I get that side of it. I really do. Again, am I condoning what he did? Absolutely not. Because he had a choice. The two people he murdered did not. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, for me, Chris Benoit should never be put in the WWE Hall of Fame. Ever. Can I watch his matches? Yes. And I did this past week. Because it's like, I forgot what he was like as a wrestler. And he had such an intensity to him. Like, he was an amazing wrestler. His wife had such a wrestling legacy that, personally, I feel that Nancy Benoit, a.k.a. Woman, should be put in the Hall of Fame. His wife should be. She was an amazing valet/manager, you know. And I feel so strongly about this that he should never be put into that Hall of Fame. If the WWE even brought that up, they'd probably lose me as a fan for the rest of my life. You know, because he had a choice. He made his choice. You know, he destroyed his legacy in that one weekend. But you should not destroy another legacy with Nancy in the process, right? Because she didn't have a choice in this matter. So that's how I feel about it. How do you feel about it? That was pretty intense there for about 10 minutes, but yeah.
I don't have a connection. I feel like if they want to do anything with him, I think they should turn it into a mental health awareness campaign.
Yeah.
I feel that that would be a very fitting, instead of dismissing him or removing him or pretending he doesn't exist, turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
And as far as going into the Hall of Fame, I don't give a rat's ass one way or the other who goes into that.
It's a hot topic button for wrestling fans. It really is. I'm just being honest.
For all you wrestling fans out there, I don't care.
And I'll be honest with you, I probably never even would have did this if I didn't listen to that podcast.
I was wondering why all of a sudden this was your obsession.
I listened to Austin Boyer's Wrestling World podcast, and he brought that up. And we both agree he should never be put in the Hall of Fame. But I wanted to let people know why he shouldn't be put in the Hall of Fame. But in that same breath, I feel that his wife, they need to bring her into the Hall of Fame. She was
she a wrestler herself?
She wrestled one match, but she was a valet or manager her whole career. And she had...
And they go into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Okay, then maybe I'll stand behind her and promote that. But as far as... No.
No, I don't think he should be allowed.
I think they should use his name to promote mental wellness or something along that line. Seeking treatment. Stop looking at it as such a horrible thing for men to have feelings. And men need to stop bashing other men and boys about having feelings. Because y'all do it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll be the first one to tell you I do.
You all do it, and it
man up, you big wuss. You know
exactly. That drives me bonkers.
Yep. I'm not gonna get into my personal life too much. I already did enough of that. So I mean, I agree with you on that. I don't celebrate what, you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm, because I don't condone his actions. There's so much involved with this that it probably could have been prevented.
Oh, I think so.
And
but your world of wrestling is so manly.
Well, nowadays it's womanly too.
It's all manly. Even if you're a woman, I have a feeling that it's all manly. You can't complain about your aches and pains. You can't talk about your feelings. Because then you're being girly.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to wrestle a girl.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I do. That's a topic for a different show.
Yeah,
so.
Not ours.
But that was the tragic story of the Benoit family murders and suicide. So, yeah. What?
Nothing.
You learned a little bit more about me.
Yeah. I learned more about wrestling than I ever wanted to know. I could not literally figure out why all of a sudden you were like obsessed. Like, I kid you not.
I wanted to see if his names and matches were actually wiped out of their
I
shows.
understand that what he did was wrong. But removing him from everything, I think, is also wrong because it's just covering up what took place.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel that that's right.
Yeah.
That's just trying to cover it up and pretend that nothing ever happened. And that's not right.
Let's just pretend that he never existed.
That's basically what they're trying to do. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the family.
Let's not have a adult conversation about what led up to this, what caused this. Let's be real about this, right? And it's not just wrestling. There's other ones too.
Yeah, I know. But wrestling is 100% manly man.
Football is another one, so, I mean, whatever. Said my piece. Anyway, so... There you go.
So if you want more of All Hallows Eve Podcast, shoot on over to www.allhallowsevepodcast.com. Find our links to our merchandise, other episodes, our fan page, some jokes and other little things up there. Bring your friends over.
Yeah, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and tell your friends about us. So... What? You fucking got the hand movements going and whole 9 yards. Good God. Anyway.
You want a joke?
Sure, why not? I'll
what
take a
fruit
joke.
do scarecrows love the most?
What fruit do scarecrows love the most?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Strawberries.
Fucking tell them.
Stay spooky, my friends.